This is part 2 of my story on how I healed myself naturally after a breast cancer diagnosis. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, please check in the description below this video. The link will be there for you. I do recommend you go and watch that first if you haven't yet. In that video, I talk about some things leading up to the diagnosis, including a surgery, a lumpectomy that I did go through. However, it didn't really have the results that I hoped for, which is basically what started this natural self-healing journey, which I'm going to share more about with you here today. There's so many things that I've tried and have learned throughout this process. It's been a period of about 2 years since I had the surgery and realized that I really needed to take my own healing into my own hands, because what conventional medicine was recommending for me was not working. And that became very clear for me very quickly. You can learn more about that in part 1. In this video, I'm going to share with you more about what I tried, what worked, what didn't work, in regards to self-healing and natural healing remedies and modalities. I won't get into everything in depth because there's just so much, but that's okay. Subscribe to my channel so you can stay tuned for the next videos to come, where I will be getting more in depth in all of these different things that I've learned. And with that said, before I get started, just a quick disclaimer here. I am not a doctor or a medical expert. I'm just sharing here my own story, what worked for me, what didn't work for me, because I believe that many of the things that I've discovered along the way, it would have been so helpful to know this beforehand. But I didn't really know any of this, so I went through a long process of trial and error, and luckily I've come out the other end. But I know that this information that I'm going to share with you is not so easily accessible. It's not so easy to find. And so I think it's really important that I share this, because it can change lives. It's definitely changed my life. It's probably even saved my life. But with that said, I do recommend, going to a doctor and hearing them out, seeing what they say if you are going through something similar. But then do your own research and look into the other possibilities, the other options, some of which I will be sharing with you today. And then I strongly encourage you to make a decision on how you move forward, whether it's with or without conventional medicine, but by listening to yourself. Listen to your heart, to your intuition, which is a process that I've also had to go through. It wasn't that easy to hear, my own intuition and know what is best for me from the beginning. But some of the things I'm going to share with you in this video and upcoming videos will help you with that. Really, it does come down to that, because the healing journey is going to look different for everyone. And I think that's really important to acknowledge. I think that's something that most of us, conventional medicine included, does not really understand or cater to, right? It's just a one size fits all. And one of the main things that really seemed strange to me and encouraged me to look into doing this by myself, look into other options, not only was the surgery that I did that didn't really have any results, but also just realizing that most people in the conventional medicine arena are not concerned at all with the cause, right? Why this happened, where this came from, how did you get to this point? And for me, that makes no sense. Like, we absolutely must address the root cause, right? Every single problem that exists in the world, whether it's a problem with your business or with your family or with your kids, with health, whatever it is, the only true way to fix the problem, to find a solution, is to know what caused it in the first place, right? Rather than just playing whack-a-mole, trying to get rid of the symptoms, which are only the effect, the result, right? But what was the cause? What caused this effect? And if I do get rid of it, does that mean the cause disappears as well, or is it going to continue to return? And this is something that was a bit of a rude awakening for me, and I realized very quickly that if you do not address the root cause, it will continue to reappear, whether that's in the same or a different way. But as I shared in part 1, one of the first things I did when I received the news was to change my diet. I knew that this was something that I could do fairly quickly. It was not easy to change my eating habits so drastically, so quickly, but I knew that it was something that I could start doing right away, and it was something, physical and tangible, which just made it seem like a good place to start. So that's what I did. I started researching about, health and how what we put in our body affects our body, our health, but also our mind. And so I changed from, I wasn't eating like a typical, like a standard American diet. I've always been pretty health conscious, but at the same time, I've struggled with creating limits for myself and sticking to those. But after I started researching the different options, what made most sense to me was eating in a way that was most in alignment with biology and nature and how our anatomy, right? Like how we were built, how we were made, what our digestive system, even our mouth and teeth and everything are designed to eat or digest, and what they're not designed to eat and digest. And so looking at that way, I moved to a vegan diet and then quickly switched to a raw vegan diet and continued with that for about 8 months. And there were periods of time throughout those 8 months where I only ate fruit, or I did a 2-week juice cleanse, for example. I also tried a 3-day water fast. So I was experimenting with different things like that, but that's one of the main changes that I made. And I stuck with that for about 8 months before I took a step back and kind of analyzed what was happening, right? Is this working? And I realized that no, not really. Like it had a lot of great benefits, other benefits like mental clarity and concentration and things. I definitely felt that I had more energy. So these were very positive changes. However, the physical situation was not changing. It was the same. Nothing was really happening, no results there. So that's when I really realized that, just coming at this from a very physical level isn't going to cut it, right? First, I tried the surgery, which was a very physical approach, right? Let's just take it out. They did that, but then it reappeared. Within 2 months, it was back. And so, that was the first thing. But still I went for the physical changes with my diet and things, just because it seemed easier. It was easier to wrap my head around that this could really help. But after trying that consistently for 8 months, I realized, okay, no, I really need to go beyond the physical. I really need to look into, the energetics of this, the mental part of this, right? How the mental health affects your physical health, our emotions and the emotional health, and the psychology behind dis-ease, which is something that I always believed in. I always knew how important mindset is, and the psychology and the things we say to each other and what we believe. It literally affects everything in our lives, including our bodies. However, I just didn't know at that time how to actually go about this and approach it in this way. Managing a team, taking care of my daughter, homeschooling her, it was actually a lot less stressful, and believe it or not, less time consuming, which I didn't expect, than when we had her in a local school. Yet still, I felt so overwhelmed with so many things to do and take care of that honestly, my health was not my number one priority. It was something I was thinking about every single day and making these changes for, but apart from that, I just kind of continued my life as usual. So I actually ended up signing up for a course on money manifestation. Interestingly enough, in this manifestation course that I was taking, part of what we were doing is something that's called subconscious reprogramming. So I'm not going to get into the details of it, which was basically this hypnosis or meditation technique where you are guided to go back to moments in your childhood where you began to believe certain things. You made a decision to believe something in order to help you through that situation. And most of the time, it did help you through that situation at the time. However, those beliefs and those decisions that we made as a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, right, or a 6-year-old, or they stick with you for the rest of your life. Through these sessions that we would have of subconscious reprogramming, I began to realize all these blocks and deep-seated limiting subconscious beliefs that I had and how they were affecting everything in my life. One of the biggest issues I had at that time, which made it really difficult for me to find the peace, to find the time and the space to look into myself, begin the self-healing, was that I was just very angry. I had a lot of anger. It's kind of embarrassing to admit, but it is a part of my journey, so I'm sharing it with you. And I realized through these subconscious reprogramming sessions where the anger came from. I realized that a lot of it wasn't even mine. I sort of just adopted it as mine, but really it was from generations prior to myself. And so learning things like that, for example, made it so much easier to just let it go, or to begin to let it go, because it didn't happen instantly. But it's amazing how much I've changed in that aspect because of it. And so I was doing that work and I was noticing changes in my behavior, in my mood, and just how I was feeling from day to day, and also, of course, how I was thinking. So I would have these thoughts that were disturbing, basically, and they would make me feel angry. They would make me feel afraid. And then I would act in a certain way that I was not proud of because of that. So together with that and other things I was doing, like I was taking a course, one of Dr. Joe Dispenza's courses, and doing his meditations. And, you know, it's not just the meditations though, of course. It's not just these subconscious reprogramming sessions. Then the real work happens after that, where you go back into your everyday life and you have to consciously work on changing the habits. So I began that process of being aware of my emotions. And if I felt angry, right, like giving myself that extra moment to pause and calm down before reacting, before deciding what to do. So it was a process for a few months of meditating and doing these subconscious reprogramming sessions where I would begin to release these blocks and beliefs that were not serving me and reframing them, but then also putting in the work on a day-to-day basis when triggers would come up, changing the way I responded to those triggers. It was definitely a process of deconditioning and then reconditioning, and, you know, dealing with those triggers, because they're going to come up no matter what, but responding to them in a different way. And then somehow I stumbled upon something fascinating, something life-changing. And I knew in that moment, when I started to look into it and research it, that this was it. This was different than everything else I had learned and tried, and this was going to change my life. And I instantly immersed myself in this knowledge of German New Medicine, because this is what I then was recommended by someone to look into German New Medicine. And I will be creating more videos, many more videos on German New Medicine, where I get into it in further depth. So depending on when you're watching this video, check the description as well for those links. If those videos have already been created, then the links will be in there and you can go right away and learn more about this if you'd like. But I will give a brief summary of what this is all about in a moment. When I learned about it, I found it to be very fascinating. It totally resonated and made so much sense that this was basically a body of knowledge and a way of looking at things, a way of looking at health, a whole new paradigm for health that explained how I had gotten here and was going to help me find the root, my particular personal root cause, and therefore resolution and healing. However, I started going about it in the wrong way, accidentally. So it wasn't until a year later that this information actually did serve to be the main catalyst for me discovering the root cause, for how I had gotten to this point, and therefore giving me the information I needed to complete the healing process. So what German New Medicine basically says is that it's this looking at the psychology behind dis-ease. It basically states that almost all dis-ease starts in the psyche. It's not just on the physical level. You experience an event in your life that is unexpected, it's acute, and it's isolating. It is referred to as a conflict shock. And this conflict shock affects your emotions. It's a trauma, but it's all about how you perceive the situation. But basically what it says is you have this situation that's traumatic, that's unexpected, that catches you off guard, and according to how your psyche perceives it, it can then send a signal to the brain, which then sends a signal to the corresponding organ related to how you perceive the situation, and it signals to that organ or that part of your body to adapt itself in a way that's intended to help you through that situation, to help guarantee your survival. And then when there's a resolution and that situation or that conflict has been resolved, that adaptation is now basically repaired and returned to its original state. And you're healed. Voila! Your body knows exactly how to heal you, and it does it perfectly without your awareness even, if you don't interfere with it. And this is the problem that happens most of the time with us humans, because this is all the same with animals. But when it comes to humans, we often interfere because we get stuck in these thought loops and we ruminate on it, and we go back and we remember and relive this traumatic experience over and over again, tricking our bodies, tricking our psyche and our brain, tricking it to think that the situation is still happening. We're reliving it and our body doesn't know the difference. So it continues to activate this adaptation over and over and over again, to the point where there's just too much stress in the body, and it becomes chronic. And that's how we get into these situations. I had believed, I was certain that it was because of something very different than it actually was. So basically, when I was 19, I was diagnosed with MRKH syndrome, which is an abbreviation for the longer term, which is basically just the names of the doctors who discovered this. 1 in every 5,000 women are born either without a uterus or with an underdeveloped uterus. And it can sometimes affect other areas of the body as well, or related reproductive organs. So at 19, I was told that I was born without a uterus. I later learned at the age of 31 that I actually do have a uterus. It's just underdeveloped. So I don't menstruate, and I've been told I can't carry a baby, although I produce eggs and could do surrogacy. Anyways, that's a whole other topic. But the point is, receiving this information, for me at that time, I was not thinking about having kids or starting a family. And it really affected me in the sense that I felt like my womanhood was kind of stripped away from me, right? All of my friends had gotten their periods and everything in school, and I was always wondering, like, why not me? But I thought it was just coming late. Anyways, when I realized this, I was like, what does this mean? I have the biology of a woman, I look and feel like a woman. However, I don't have all the female parts, because I believe that's what I was told at the time. So this was a very unexpected, traumatic situation for me. It was a conflict shock. I had believed that this was the reason that my body had adapted in this way. There's basically 2 main types of conflicts, according to German New Medicine, that could affect the breast area. It all makes perfect sense. What is the breast for? Or what does it represent? Nurturing, feeding a child, and nursing it to health, or just nursing it to help it grow, right? But it's that nurturing, taking care, mothering type caring for someone type of purpose, right? Like that's basically the purpose of this part of the body. And so German New Medicine talks about 2 main conflicts that could affect the breast according to how we perceive these conflicts. One is called the nest worry conflict. When you are worried about someone who you love, maybe they are sick or they got into some trouble, or you don't know where they are, something like that. And then the other is a separation conflict, where you feel that you have been separated from someone that you love. Or it could also be something that you love. But the most obvious is a baby being separated from the mother's breast. So it's related to a feeling of being torn from my breast. And I did feel like my womanhood was basically torn from my breast. So at that time, it made sense that that was the cause. So throughout the next year, I continued to try many different healing modalities that worked with the mind, the psyche, the subconscious, and I was working on releasing these trapped emotions that were stored in my body from that time, from when I received that diagnosis at 19, because I did not deal properly with those emotions. I suppressed a lot of the emotions that I had at the time. I didn't talk to anyone about it. And so that's what I was really focusing on, was going back, recognizing those emotions that were stored in there that need to be recognized, that need to be acknowledged and felt in order to be released. And so I did emotional experiencing, I did somatic release breath work, I did these subconscious reprogramming sessions that I mentioned, which often brought up a lot of emotions, and many other things to just begin to release these emotions from my body. And I know that helped a lot, and it really allowed to sort of peel back the layers of all this hurt and all this shame. I felt so much shame from receiving that news, and all this fear and all the things that came with that. You know, it really allowed me to begin to peel back those layers and let go of all of that, to come back more to me and who I actually am underneath all of that. And I started talking about it more. I started sharing about it more and overcoming the fear of telling people about this. But I was working with this and releasing all of this over the next year or so. And German New Medicine was a little bit on the back burner because I thought I had already found the cause, and now I was just trying to find a way to change my perception. Because what German New Medicine says, once you've found the cause, there are two ways to resolve it and heal. The first is to find a real life practical solution, which there wasn't really one in my case, unless maybe I had a uterus transplant. Now I have the uterus and now I feel like a complete woman. That could have been like a practical solution, but that's not something I was ready to undergo. And actually, like I said, I did at the age of 31, in just a regular sort of ultrasound, I discovered that I actually do have a uterus. It is underdeveloped. So that for me actually was already a resolution, at least to a certain degree, of what I had been feeling this whole time. I was like, okay, at least I have the organ. So that did make me feel more like a complete woman. And this was something that I was battling with and really going through, and I definitely think it doesn't really matter if you have all the organs or not, or what your body looks like, or what it's like inside or out. That doesn't determine, if you're a real woman or not. But these are the insecurities that I had at the time. So I was releasing all this stuff, coming to terms and talking about this and everything, but there was still no visible physical results with the nodule. There was no changes. It was not shrinking or anything. And so I was, again, a little bit confused, like, what am I doing wrong? I feel like I've kind of come to terms with this. I've accepted myself regardless of this, but where's the healing? Why is the physical healing not coming with this? And that's when I met one of my now best friends who was planning to attend an ayahuasca ceremony that weekend. This was like a Tuesday, and she was going to go to the ceremony, which was happening on a Saturday. And it was one of those things where as soon as she said it, instantly I knew, like, this, I need to go. This is my opportunity. Mama Ayahuasca, as we call her, as we call it, Mother Ayahuasca is calling me, and this is my time, and I'm going to go. And so I decided to go to the ceremony that Saturday and began to prepare myself physically and mentally. And as they often encourage, I went into it with an intention. My intention was to basically be shown what is left to do, right? Like, why, how did I get here? I wanted to understand the situation better because I knew I was missing something. And I didn't get the answer that day in the ceremony, but almost immediately after, things started to change. So many things started happening. It was actually very amazing and exciting and quite fun. I just started noticing all these synchronicities and signs guiding me to do one thing or the other. And I was following the signs. I felt so connected to myself, to my higher self, to nature after that ceremony. And within about 2 weeks after the ceremony, the answer was revealed to me. Something was different that day. I woke up and I basically just had this feeling like, this is the day. Like, I am sick of this. I am so over this. I'm done with this. I'm going to figure out right now, today, what is missing, what is going on, what do I still need to do to resolve this, and why hasn't it been resolved yet? And I made a decision that today I'm going to figure this out. And I think that was so powerful. When you make a firm, convicted decision consciously, your subconscious hears that. Everything in your world begins to change and shift in order to become in alignment with that. And so, remarkably enough, later on that same morning, just a couple hours later, I figured out what the cause was. I went back into the information that I had learned about German New Medicine and really dug deep into it. And I found some new information from some new people. And I realized that I was viewing things in the wrong way. Something I'll get into more in one of the other videos that I do about German New Medicine, but I'll explain a little bit here so this makes sense, is that your handedness for many diseases, which aren't even called that in German New Medicine, actually, they're called special biological programs, because it's actually your body adapting to the conflict, activating a biological program that's already in your genes, activating it in order to adapt the tissue or the organ to deal with the situation at hand, right? To help you survive, as I mentioned before. So it's not actually a disease. It's actually your body helping you, adapting in order to help you survive a traumatic, difficult situation that you went through. And I think just realizing that, even though at the time I didn't know exactly what the situation was that had triggered this for me and how to heal it, but that allowed me, it gave me more time to be able to look into this and figure this out without freaking out and making a rash decision because of fear, or without also creating other problems because of the fear. I wasn't afraid of things, other things happening, it's spreading or anything like that, which I'll get into for another video as well, because there's also a lot about that they say that is not true. But anyway, so for a lot of these special biological programs, or as conventional medicine calls it, diseases, according to your handedness, if you're left-handed or right-handed, it may play out slightly differently. For example, I had believed that I was actually biologically left-handed, because there are a fair amount of us that are actually biologically left-handed, but have been trained to write with your right hand and to do things with your right hand from a very young age. And so we just believe we're right-handed, but biologically we're actually left-handed. So one of the tests to find this out is the Clapp test. So I believed that I was left-handed. And for a left-handed woman, if her right breast is affected, which was my case, that means that it's a mother-child related issue. So this is why I was also so convinced that it was related to this MRKH diagnosis that I had received at 19. Me, like the potential of being a mom, or my womanhood being torn from my breast, related to like a mother-child thing. But that morning in February, I realized, as I went further into this information, I found all these other tests that you can do, and I started doing them all. And I realized that no, I am actually biologically right-handed. And therefore, my mother-child side is the left side of my body, whereas the right side is actually my partner side. So that would be like affected by things that are related to a partner type of relationship. So it could be a friendship, or it could be an actual partner, a romantic partner. It could be, anyone in your life, even a parent, but who has a partner-like relationship with you. It could even be a dog, but who you feel is like your best friend or like a partner. But that changed everything, because from that moment on, I knew, wow, this has nothing to do with my whole uterus situation with the MRKH diagnosis. This actually is a partner conflict. And so I started to work back on my timeline, going back to that first day when I realized the nodule or the lump in my breast, and went through like what was happening at that time of my life and what happened before that. Because one thing that German New Medicine teaches is that a lot of the symptoms, not all of them, but a lot of them occur in the healing phase, in the repair phase. So actually after the conflict has been resolved, which is really tricky, because you may have gone through something really tough, and then it's like, okay, I'm finally I'm relaxed, I'm over it now. But then the symptoms reappear, and like, really, I just got through this and now I have to deal with this health situation. But it's actually your body repairing the adaptation that it had made while you were going through that conflict. The repair phase is often where the symptoms occur, and that is the case with the separation conflict related to the breast. So as I went back over my timeline, thinking about what was going on in my life around that time, I realized that there was an event, something did happen with my husband around that time that really affected me. Looking back at it now, it wasn't even that big of a deal, but at the time, because I was already so unsure of myself, I had such a low self-esteem and low self-worth. And basically I had been living my life trying to please other people, seeking approval of other people. It's all the conditioning and these limiting beliefs and insecurities that I had that caused me to perceive the situation with my husband as so detrimental. For me, it was kind of like the end of the world at the time. And while it was just a kind of silly case of negligence, basically on his part, where I took it very personally. I basically internalized it as, I'm not enough, and maybe I'm not as important to you as I thought I was, and it just kind of started this negative spiral, this negative thought pattern and this negative spiral. But I never fully dealt with it. But, after a little while, I forgave, I kind of let go, but I didn't fully heal it, because I was still carrying around, and I would sometimes go back to the situation and remind myself of it. And there's all these triggers that would come up related to this. So it was still very much alive in my psyche, which is why, the symptom appeared, but it didn't the healing didn't complete. So it didn't just appear and then finish the healing and go away. It continued to persist. But anyways, now that I knew what the actual cause was, I began to address the correct cause, right? And move in the right direction, not like I was before. So I spoke with my husband and we worked through some things, and I let out, these feelings and fears and whatnot that I had been carrying also in silence for all these years since that had happened, which was at the point like 5 years before this time. But again, in this situation as well, I had a lot of suppressed emotions and things. So I began to deal with those, let those out. And as I began to do that and talk about the situation and begin to find a resolution with my husband, and also just go within and work on my own issues that caused me to see this situation in that particular way, I finally began to see the physical results and physical changes of healing that I had been waiting for so long. And this is what made it so clear to me that clearly I have finally found the root cause. Because now that I'm working on the cause, I'm actually seeing results, right? And I know they're going to be long-term, long-lasting results. It's like you have a flood in the basement and you're bucketing out the water of the basement, but the leak is not in the basement. The leak is on the first floor and it's pouring the water into the basement. So it doesn't matter how long you're bucketing water right out of the basement and trying to clean that up. If you don't fix the leak, the flood is just going to continue, right? So you have to fix the leak in order to actually solve the problem. And so that's a really good way to look at, the importance of finding the root cause. And this experience that I've had just proves that to be true so much. I instantly began to see results. And, healing is not a linear process, but it feels good to see progress and to know that you're on the right track. So the resolution was really made, I believe, when I talked to my husband and we worked things out and I let out all of these kind of hidden thoughts and emotions that I had but was scared to share with him or with anyone for that matter. But there were still triggers that would come up that would kind of poke at this wound that I had and kind of reactivate it and get me back into some of those similar thought patterns and feelings. So this is something that I've been working on. This is something that, still took some time to work through. And maybe I will always be working through this in healing to a certain degree. But what it's come to more than anything for me, even though the cause was triggered by an event that was related to my husband, the reason I perceived it the way I did was because of my own issues. And so it's really been a journey of, radical self-love and acceptance and acknowledging my needs and what I need in any given moment. So if there are triggers that come up, I'm very attentive of them and I will stop and give myself the attention or the time or whatever it is that I need to get through that and release that and not ignore it. And so I don't know if my healing process is completely over or if it ever truly or if it ever fully will be, but I do know 100% without a doubt that I'm on the right path, that I am healing, and the physical results are there showing it, and I have no fear. I know I'm moving in the right direction, and I know as long as I continue to put myself first and truly foster that self-love and acceptance, I know that I'll just keep moving in the right direction and that I will be okay. And that anything else, I'm going to be so much more prepared and ready to deal with them and to prevent myself from even going down a path like this in the future, because I have the solid base, that solid foundation within me, regardless of what happens around me or what happens with anyone else in my life. I need to be taking care of me first. And that self-worth and that self-love needs to come from me before anyone else. And this was one of my biggest issues, is that I didn't have that. And so when, the people in my life that I cared about, if they didn't meet certain expectations that I had or do certain things that I expected or wanted from them, it would really affect me. And I would believe that it was because I wasn't enough. And there's a lot of self-pity. And even I would punish myself, these negative thoughts and things, when things wouldn't go my way, basically. But now that I understand this, it's a lot easier to avoid going down that same path, because it all starts within. You have the key. You have the root cause within you. Your subconscious mind knows everything, and it knows how it's affecting you. and it's responding to your environment in order to protect you. But it's about tapping into that and understanding, why is it responding in this way? What happened that I'm ignoring on a conscious level, or that I'm not tending to, or that I'm suppressing, right? What is it? And that's how you're going to find that root cause and truly begin healing yourself. As I mentioned, I will get more into German New Medicine specifically as I can. This has been absolutely essential for my healing and for understanding all of this, but also all the other modalities that I have used, such as the breath work, emotional experiencing, the meditation, mental rehearsal, visualization, subconscious reprogramming. I've even done QHHT, which is the hypnosis, the quantum healing hypnosis technique, created by Dolores Cannon, in case you're familiar with that. So many things that I've tried, which has all just been amazing, and it's opened up a whole new world for me of what's possible and how things truly work in this world. But I'll get into that in future videos, so stay tuned if you'd like to learn more about that. I just want to finish with saying that nobody knows what's best for you and your healing and your happiness and your health than you, because the answer lies within you. You'll never find it outside of you. So regardless of what you decide to do to treat, symptoms or something you might be going through, remember that. And I encourage you to at least look into this, because not only will it help you secure long-lasting, deep healing, but it's also going to help you discover yourself and be able to navigate this world that we live in so much more successfully. But what you put into your body physically, take care of your health, get good sleep, all of those things, yes. But remember, what's within is without, and what's above is below. It starts within. It starts above. It all starts here. And this explains why there are people who are chain smokers for their entire life and never get lung cancer. This explains why there are people who eat and live a very, very healthy lifestyle, yet they receive these diagnoses that other people don't sometimes, who maybe are doing everything wrong. While these things are important and can help, and I really do believe that making the changes that I did with diet really helped me eventually get to the point where I did find the root cause and able to do the inner work to then heal myself. Clearing up my mind and my body helped me get there 100%, but it was not the root cause. And I think a lot of people these days are getting stuck in that. They're getting fooled with that. So be careful and know that while those things may help, the root cause of all dis-ease starts in the psyche. I'm grateful to be here today, able to share this with you, and appreciate you listening. Let me know if maybe you or someone you know has had any similar experiences, or if you have any questions or requests for topics that you'd like me to get into further in the near future. Thank you, friends. I will see you in the next video.